I died on a Tuesday in March, and the last thing I saw was my sister adjusting the morphine drip while my husband held my hand and told me to rest. I remember the ceiling tiles. I remember the way the light came through the blinds in stripes. I remember Isabella's perfume, the one I bought her for her 30th birthday, and Marcus saying, "It's almost over, Olivia, just rest," in the voice he used to use when he was lying about working late. Then I woke up in our apartment in Tribeca on a Wednesday in March, 1 year earlier, and the alarm on my nightstand said 6:15, and Marcus was in the shower humming the song he hummed when he was happy with himself, and I knew exactly what was about to happen to me for the next 365 days, because I had already lived them once. I did not move. I did not breathe loudly. I lay in our bed and I looked at the ceiling and I let my mind go through it again, slowly, the way you check the locks on a house you no longer trust. Isabella, my sister, 2 years younger, a clinical pharmacist at Mount Sinai with a specialty in oncology dosing and access to every controlled substance in the cabinet. She had been adjusting my medication at family dinners for 8 months before I died. The headaches the neurologist could not explain. The fatigue my GP called stress. The tremor in my left hand that started in October and was diagnosed as early onset Parkinson's in February. None of it was real. All of it was her. Marcus, my husband, 41 years old, 6 years older than me, charming in the way that men are charming when they have been told their whole lives that they are. CFO of the company I founded. The company he had been telling our investors he co-founded for the last 3 years, since the Series B, since the Forbes piece that put both our faces on the cover and called him the strategic mind behind Vellum's rise. I had built Vellum in my apartment in 2017 with a laptop and the line of credit and an idea about how legal contracts could be parsed by a model I trained myself. Marcus came in as employee number 11 in 2019, after we got married. He was my husband. I wanted him close. I gave him the CFO title because I trusted him and because I thought it would make him feel like he was building something with me instead of watching me build it without him. By 2021, he was telling reporters we had built it together. By 2023, he was telling the board that I was brilliant but unstable. By the time I started getting sick, he had already begun the slow work of repositioning himself as the steady hand at the wheel of a company whose founder was, regrettably, in declining health. Isabella started sleeping with him in 2022. I knew because, in the life I had already lived, I found the messages on his iPad in the week before my final hospitalization, when I was too weak to do anything about them and they no longer bothered to hide. The will. I had signed a new will in February of my death year, 3 weeks before I went into the hospital for the last time. Marcus had brought it to me. He said our lawyer had drafted it. He said I should sign it because the old one was outdated and because I was sick and we needed things in order. I had been on so much medication by then that I signed without reading. The will gave Marcus controlling interest in Vellum and named Isabella as the executor of my estate. I had laughed about it in the hospital in a moment of clarity 2 days before the morphine. I had said to my mother, "Isn't it funny that they put Isabella in charge?" My mother had patted my hand and said, "She's your sister, sweetheart. Of course she'll take care of things." I lay in the bed in our apartment in March, and I listened to Marcus humming in the shower, and I understood, with a clarity that felt almost cold, that I had 365 days to make sure none of them ever saw it coming. I got up. I made coffee. I walked into the kitchen in my robe and I said good morning to my husband when he came out of the bathroom, and I let him kiss the top of my head, and I let him say, "You look tired, baby. Are you feeling okay?" And I smiled at him and said, I felt fine. He looked at me for a half-second longer than he should have. I saw it land. He had expected me to say I was tired. He had been laying the groundwork of Olivia is not well for months by then, in small comments to friends and family and the board. My agreement was part of his architecture. My disagreement, even small, was a variable he had not planned for. I made him eggs. I asked about his day. I sent him out the door at 7:45 with a kiss on the cheek and a smile that I held until the elevator doors closed. Then I sat down at the kitchen island, and I opened my laptop, and I started writing. The first thing I wrote was a list of every piece of evidence I would need and the date by which I needed it. Pharmacy access logs, prescription records, the timeline of the affair with corroborating documentation, the original founding documents of Vellum, which existed on a hard drive in my office at the company, the IP assignments, which Marcus had been quietly modifying since 2022 to list himself as co-inventor, the board minutes from every meeting where he had positioned himself for succession, my own medical records from the year ahead, which I would need to obtain in real time as the symptoms appeared, because the symptoms would now be evidence of a homicide in slow motion, rather than evidence of a wife in decline. I wrote until 11 in the morning. Then I called Dr. Eleanor Cho's office and asked for a same-week appointment. Eleanor was the head of clinical toxicology at NYU, and a woman I had known since college when we lived 2 doors down from each other in the same dorm. In the life I had already lived, I had not seen her in 4 years. The receptionist offered me Friday at 3. I took it. That afternoon, I went into the office. I walked through the open floor and I said hello to my engineers, and I sat down in my office, and I closed the door, and I cried for exactly 4 minutes, because I had not seen my company in a year, and I had built it, and they had taken it from me, and I needed to feel it once before I started. Then I stopped. I washed my face in the bathroom attached to my office. I came out. I called my assistant Sophia in, and I asked her to pull every document related to Marcus's IP assignments going back to 2019. Sophia looked at me and said, "All of them." "All of them," I said. She nodded and went to do it. She was 26 years old, and she had been with me for 3 years, and she was, although she did not yet know it, the person who was going to help me bring my husband down. I will tell you about the first move now, because the first move is what shifted the temperature of everything that followed. 3 weeks after I woke up, Marcus came home from the office at 8 in the evening and told me that the board wanted to discuss a restructuring of the executive committee at the next quarterly meeting in May. He said this casually while he was loosening his tie. He said they think we should formalize the leadership structure now that we're past Series C. In the life I had already lived, this was the conversation where I had agreed to step back from the day-to-day and let Marcus handle the operational side while I focused on, in his phrasing, the visionary work. 6 weeks later, I had stopped being able to read documents reliably because of the dosing Isabella was administering, and the visionary work had become the only work I could plausibly claim to do, which had then become evidence that I was no longer fit to do any of it. I looked at my husband across our kitchen and I said, "That's interesting. I've been thinking about restructuring too." He paused with his tie half off. "Oh," he said. "I'm bringing in a new general counsel," I said. "I've already started interviewing. I want someone who reports directly to me and handles the IP portfolio." His face did not change. He was good at his face. But I had been married to him for 6 years, and I had watched him calculate in real time on 1,000 evenings, and I saw the half-second of recalibration. The general counsel role had been vacant since the previous lawyer left in November, Marcus had been planning to fill it himself with a candidate of his choosing who would report into him as CFO. "That's a big decision, baby," he said. "Maybe we should talk about it together. Why don't you bring me the candidates and we can—" "I've already made the hire," I said. "She starts Monday. Her name is Vivian Park. She comes from Skadden. She's reviewed our IP portfolio, and she's flagged some inconsistencies she wants to walk us through next week." I said it the way you would tell someone what you were going to make for dinner. Marcus looked at me. I watched him decide which version of himself to put on. He chose the version that loved me. He came across the kitchen, and he put his hands on my waist, and he said, "Olivia, you've been working so hard, and are you sleeping enough? And you know I worry about you." "I'm sleeping fine," I said. "I feel great, actually." I let him kiss me. I smiled when he pulled back. "Vivian's looking forward to meeting you." He went to take a shower. I heard the water turn on. I stood in the kitchen and I let myself enjoy, for the first time, the specific pleasure of having just told my husband something he could not stop and that he did not yet understand how to counter. Vivian Park was real. I had hired her on the previous Tuesday. She had spent the week pulling every IP filing Vellum had submitted since 2019 and cross-referencing them against the original codebase, which I still had on a personal hard drive in the safe at my apartment. By the following Monday, she would have a 64-page memorandum identifying every instance in which Marcus had inserted his name into an IP assignment without legal basis. By the Monday after that, she would have referred those findings, with my authorization, to outside counsel. He did not know any of this yet. He thought I had hired a lawyer. He went into the shower thinking he had a wife who had unexpectedly hired a lawyer and that he would need to manage her over the next few weeks the way he had been managing her for years. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen island. I waited for him to come out, and when he did, I asked him about his day, and I listened to him talk, and I smiled in the right places. Isabella came over that weekend. She brought wine and a small cake from the bakery on Sullivan Street that we had been going to since we were children. She brought, also, the headache medication she had been giving me for 6 months, a compounded formulation she said her colleague had developed, which I had been taking on her recommendation since the previous fall. In the life I had already lived, I had taken it that Saturday, and the headache that followed had been the worst of the year so far. I did not take it this time. I told her I had switched to something my new doctor recommended. I said it casually, while I was pouring the wine. Isabella's face did the same thing Marcus's had done. A half-second of recalibration, then a wide, warm smile. "Oh, that's great, Liv. Who are you seeing?" "Eleanor Cho," I said. "You remember Eleanor?" A pause. "Of course," Isabella said. "She's a toxicologist now, isn't she?" "She is," I said. "She's been amazing. She wants to do a full panel, heavy metals, the works. She thinks the headaches might be environmental." I watched my sister's eyes while I said it. I had loved her my whole life. I had stood next to her at her college graduation. I had paid for her wedding when our parents would not. I had given her my dress for her 30th birthday party because she said it was the only thing in my closet that fit her properly. I watched her smile at me and pour herself another glass of wine and say, "That's so smart, Liv. I'm glad you're being proactive." And I understood that the woman I had loved my entire life had been planning to kill me for at least a year before she actually did it, and that the only thing she had ever needed from me was for me to not notice. I smiled back at her. I said thank you for the cake. I did not eat it. That night, after she left, I went into the bathroom and I took the bottle of compounded medication out of my cabinet and I sealed it in a plastic bag and I put it in the safe with the hard drive. On Monday morning, I would deliver it to Eleanor's office for analysis. By Wednesday, I would have, in writing, the chemical composition of the substance my sister had been administering to me for 6 months. Eleanor called me on Thursday afternoon. "Olivia," she said, "we need to talk in person. Today." I went to her office. I sat in the chair across from her desk. She closed the door. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she said, "The compound contains 3 substances. One is acetaminophen, which is what the label claims. The second is a low dose of methylphenidate, which would account for the initial energy spike you described. The third is a thallium derivative." I knew what thallium was. I had read every pharmacology textbook I could find in the 4 months since I woke up. "At the dose you've been taking," Eleanor said, "you would experience progressive neurological symptoms over 12 to 18 months. Headaches, tremor, cognitive decline, eventually peripheral neuropathy and cardiac complications. The symptoms would be consistent with several misdiagnoses, including atypical Parkinson's. The cause would not be detected unless someone specifically tested for it." I sat in her office. I felt my hands go cold. The room got very quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat for what felt like a long time. "Eleanor," I said, "I need a forensic chain of custody on that bottle and every test result. I need affidavits. I need it in a form that a prosecutor can use." She looked at me. "Olivia," she said, "who gave you this?" "My sister," I said. She nodded once. She did not look surprised. She had known me since we were 19. "I'll have the file ready by Monday," she said. "Do you have a lawyer?" "I have several," I said. I left her office. I walked 16 blocks back to my apartment in the cold. I did not cry. I had cried already, in my office, on the day I came back. I had cried all the crying I was going to do. By the time I got home, I had a list of 7 things I needed to do before the next quarterly board meeting in May. I will compress what happened over the next 4 months because the audience does not need every step. What matters is the shape of it. Vivian Park's memorandum on the IP fraud was complete by mid-April. I did not file it. I held it. The trump card is only a trump card if you do not show it before the trick. I hired a private investigator named Daniel Reyes, a former federal prosecutor turned private, who in 3 weeks produced a complete documentary record of Marcus's affair with my sister, including hotel receipts dating back to 2022, encrypted message logs Daniel obtained through means I did not ask about, and a recording of a phone call between them in late April, in which Isabella complained that Olivia is being weird this year, and Marcus said, "Give it time. The symptoms always take a few months to escalate." I sat in Daniel's office with headphones on, and I listened to my husband say that sentence 3 times. Then I asked him to make me 4 certified copies of the recording. In May, 2 weeks before the quarterly board meeting, my older brother Nathan called me from London, where he had been running the European arm of our father's investment firm for the last 6 years. Nathan and I had not been close since our father died in 2019, and the will had been settled in a way that left a coldness between us that neither of us had bothered to thaw. In the life I had already lived, I had not spoken to Nathan in the year of my dying. He had come to the funeral. He had stood in the back. This time, I had called him in February. I had told him I needed his help. I had told him what Marcus was doing to the company our father had given me the seed money to start. I had not yet told him about Isabella. I told him about Isabella in May, on a phone call that lasted 40 minutes, in which my brother said almost nothing, and at the end said, "What do you need?" What I needed was a vote. Nathan held 7% of Vellum through a family trust that had been part of the original seed structure. Combined with my 41% and Vivian's analysis of the voting agreements Marcus had quietly modified, Nathan's 7% gave me a controlling block at the May board meeting. I did not tell Marcus that Nathan and I had spoken. The board meeting was on a Thursday in the third week of May, in our offices on the 32nd floor of a building in Midtown, in the conference room with the glass walls that looked out over the park. 11 people were present, 6 board members, including Marcus and me, 2 outside counsel, Vivian Park, Nathan, who flew in on Wednesday and whom Marcus did not know was attending until Nathan walked into the room at 10 minutes past 9. Marcus's face when Nathan walked in was the first of the 3 faces I had been waiting almost a year to see. "Nathan," Marcus said, "I didn't realize you were in town." "I'm here for the meeting," Nathan said. Marcus looked at me. I was sitting at the head of the table with a folder in front of me. I had bought the folder from a stationery store on Madison Avenue the week before. It was navy blue. It was the folder I had decided I wanted to be holding when I did this. The chairman opened the meeting. We went through the agenda. Marcus presented the Q1 financials in his confident, slightly self-deprecating style, the one he used when he wanted the room to like him. I watched him perform. I had loved this performance once. I had thought it was charm. When the chairman opened the floor for any additional business, I said, "I have something." The room turned to look at me. I opened the folder. I distributed 11 copies of Vivian's IP memorandum. Over the past 6 weeks, I said, our new general counsel has conducted a review of every intellectual property filing this company has made since 2019. She has identified 41 filings in which Marcus Webb is listed as a co-inventor or sole inventor on technology to which he made no inventive contribution and to which he has no legal claim. The total estimated value of the IP improperly assigned to Mr. Webb's name is, by our outside auditor's estimate, between $64 and $78 million. The chairman's name was Charles Whitfield. He was 63 years old, and he had been on my board since the Series A. He looked down at the memorandum, and then up at me, and then at Marcus. Marcus said Olivia, in the voice he used when he was about to manage me. "I'm not finished," I said. I opened the folder again. I distributed 11 copies of Daniel's report, the investigative report on the affair, with timestamps, with hotel receipts, with one specific page on which I had highlighted a specific paragraph about the timeline of the affair beginning in March of 2022, 6 months before Marcus had voted as a board member to approve a compensation package for himself that I had opposed and lost. Mr. Webb has been engaged in an undisclosed romantic and financial relationship with my sister, Isabella Vance, since March of 2022. Several of his votes on this board, including the compensation vote of September 2022 and the equity restructuring vote of November 2023, were taken without disclosure of a material conflict of interest. Outside counsel has informed me that these votes are voidable and that Mr. Webb is personally liable for the difference. Marcus stood up. "This is insane," he said. "Olivia, what are you doing?" "I'm not finished," I said. I opened the folder a third time. I distributed 11 copies of Eleanor Cho's forensic report, the chemical analysis, the chain of custody, the affidavit, the medical opinion that the substance my sister had been giving me under the guise of a compounded headache treatment would have caused my death within 12 to 18 months of continuous administration. The room went very quiet. Charles Whitfield looked up from the report. "Olivia," he said, is this real?" "It's real," I said. "The Manhattan District Attorney's Office has been informed. My sister was arrested this morning at 7 a.m. at her apartment." Marcus made a sound. It was not a word. "Mr. Webb?" I said. And I said his name like that, Mr. Webb. And his face when I said it was the second of the 3 faces I had been waiting to see. Was aware of the administration of the substance. "We have a recorded phone call between Mr. Webb and Miss Vance, in which the timeline of my decline is discussed. The district attorney's office is in possession of that recording. Mr. Webb will not be returning to our home this evening." I looked at Charles Whitfield. I looked at the rest of the board. "I am calling for an immediate vote on Mr. Webb's removal from his position as Chief Financial Officer and from this board, and on the clawback of all improperly assigned intellectual property and all improperly compensated equity." "Nathan," I said, "has agreed to vote his shares with mine." Marcus sat down. He sat down slowly, the way a man sits down when his legs have stopped working. The vote was 8-1. Marcus voted against his own removal. No one else did. When it was over, I stood up. I picked up my folder. I walked around the conference table and I stopped in front of my husband. He looked up at me. His face was wet. He said, "Olivia, please." This was the 3rd face. The face of the man who had finally understood what he had been wrong about. "You should have let me die quietly, Marcus," I said. "You were so close." I left the room. The federal agents were waiting in the lobby because I had asked them to wait there rather than the conference room, because I had wanted Marcus to have to walk through his entire company in handcuffs after he had spent 5 years building his version of himself inside it. He did. I watched from the glass wall of the conference room. The whole floor watched. Sophia, my assistant, was standing by her desk with one hand over her mouth. When Marcus passed her, she did not look at him. She looked at me through the glass, and she nodded once. "I want to tell you what happened to them. Isabella was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, and the unauthorized practice of pharmacy. The thallium derivative she had been administering was traced to a compounding pharmacy in Queens, where she had been supplementing her access at Mount Sinai. Her trial was in October. The jury came back in 2 hours. She is serving 28 years at Bedford Hills. She has written me 4 letters. I have not opened them. Marcus was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, securities fraud, and a list of breach of fiduciary duty counts that ran to 9 pages. He took a plea in August. 16 years, federal. He tried to call me from the holding facility before sentencing. I did not accept the call. He wrote me a letter, 11 pages, explaining himself. I read the first page. He was, even then, explaining what he had done as something I had driven him to. I did not read the rest. I gave the letter to Vivian for the file. My mother. My mother is a more complicated story. She had not known about the thallium. She had known, I am almost sure, about the affair, and she had said nothing because Isabella had always been her favorite, and because saying something would have required her to choose. After the arrests, she called me and cried for an hour and asked me how I could let this happen to our family. I listened. When she was finished, I told her I would not be at Thanksgiving. I have not been at Thanksgiving since. She sends cards. I do not send them back. Nathan came back from London for good in September. He took a board seat at Vellum. He is, against every expectation either of us would have had 5 years ago, my closest friend now. We have lunch on Sundays. He brings his daughter, who is 6, and who calls me Aunt Liv, and who does not yet know any of this story, and who will not, if I can help it, ever need to. I will tell you about the new life now, briefly, because the audience deserves the warmth. I sold the apartment in Tribeca. I could not live in the kitchen, where I had made Marcus eggs the morning I came back. I bought a brownstone in the West Village with a garden in the back and a study on the 3rd floor with a window that gets the afternoon light. I work from the study 3 days a week. The other 2 I am at the office, which I redesigned in the fall with Sophia, who is now my chief of staff and who runs my schedule with a competence that her previous bosses, all male, had spent her entire career failing to notice. Vellum is worth 4 times what it was the day Marcus was arrested. The IP clawback was successful. The shareholders who had been quiet during the years Marcus was repositioning me are now the shareholders who write me letters once a quarter telling me how much they admire my leadership. I read the letters. I do not respond to most of them. Adrian. I have not mentioned Adrian. Adrian Hale is a structural engineer who designed the renovation of the brownstone, whom I met in July when his firm was contracted for the project, and who, on the 3rd meeting, brought me coffee the way I take it, without asking how I take it, because he had paid attention the first time. He is 44, he is divorced. He has a son who lives in Boston with his mother, and who Adrian sees every other weekend, with a consistency I have come to understand is the central organizing fact of his life. He proposed in March, almost exactly a year after the day I had first died, in the garden of the house he had helped me build. He proposed without a ring, because he said he wanted me to choose the ring myself, because he had paid attention to the things in my closet I had bought for myself versus the things I had been given, and he had noticed the difference. I said yes. We are getting married in June. The wedding will be small. Nathan will walk me down the aisle. My mother is not invited.